Approximately 5 children die every single day because of child abuse, and more than 70% of these children are under 3 years old. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and here to talk to us more about this and how to identify abuse is Judge Michael Ian Bender. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because child abuse is obviously something that people don't want to talk about because it's such a horrific thing. But then there's that double-edged sword, because as a result, maybe people aren't as quick to identify it and to report concerns, right?
That's true. I mean, first we have to identify what it is, different types of abuse. Obviously, you have your sexual abuse, physical abuse of different kinds. People vary upon what they think is physical abuse based upon the type of punishment that they use, although they really should never use physical punishment, and I can talk about that.
Right.
And then there's emotional abuse, which is putting the child down, telling the child that they're not worth anything. Depriving them of the ability to care for their other parent.
Right, wow. Okay, so let's talk about some of the signs of child abuse. Like, how do you know if you're somebody who's on the outside? Because you're a retired judge, you're a guardian ad litem, you represent children.
Right.
So you know that there are some things that we as just, you know, people on the outside can look for. What are those things?
That's true. So you have your obvious for physical abuse, you have the obvious things, bruises, I've seen belt marks across the face, things like that. And then sexual abuse, sometimes a little more subtle. You really look for the outcry, but bedwetting could be a sign of that. Extreme promiscuity could be the sign of that. And then there's the emotional abuse, and that's even more difficult to find. And you see a child is withdrawn. You may see a child acting out, changing their behavior, things like that. And it's a matter of paying close attention to see if that child really, does that child seem happy compared to the other children? And a lot of times that can come to fruition. You can see that, and the teachers can see that in school when you compare it to the other kids.
Right. You know, I wonder too, as someone who's worked with children for so long, are there things when you were sitting as a judge in the courtroom that you saw that you thought this should have been pretty obvious to everybody?
You know, when I was a judge, so as a judge, you hear a lot of things and you have a lot of repetition. So for instance, by the time I left the bench, I had heard about 40,000 different cases, so I was able to recognize it very quickly. It's important for parents and for family members to be in tune with their child, to see, is something happening, is something different about the child today than before. Now, you also want to educate in the schools, and you want to teach the children, because an abused child often doesn't know they're abused. They think this is normal life, this is how it is. And once you educate and once you teach what is acceptable and what's not, there may be an outcry.
So, and one of the things that you had talked to us about is this thoughtfully parenting. Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about being aware? What does that mean? So,
thoughtful parenting is a lack of physical punishment. There is no benefit whatsoever to physical punishment. Now, there's different types of physical punishment. Obviously, some are absolutely horrific, hitting with belts, hitting with extension cords. It's obviously bad. Spanking, you'll get a debate on that. There is no benefit to spanking. There are many ways to positively parent. The point of discipline is to teach the child, to function in society, to be a caring person, to do the things that make them productive in society. And when you hit, you're just really teaching that big people hit little people.
Right, right. And was that probably the biggest thing that you saw, was teaching people that any type of spanking or punishment was not going to benefit them in the long run?
Often people got it right away, and many people would say, I would never touch my child. It's obvious, but when they've been hit and when their parent has been hit, there's a cycle of violence that's going on, and not just spanking. And the idea is to break that cycle of violence. And people will say things. They'll say, well, the beatings that my dad gave me made me the man I was today.
You hear that a lot.
Right,
yes.
right. And or it's cultural. Well, when every culture says it's cultural, it's just not cultural anymore.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, what kind of resources are out there for parents who might need help, not only for themselves, but maybe concerned about others too?
So it's important to report. It's important to outreach. If you think that somebody's being abused, you can call the police. You can report it to DCFS. You can mention it to the school. A lot of these people are mandatory reporters, and they'll contact the right authorities.
Yeah, so what about that, you know, sometimes if you have that gut feeling that there's something going wrong, but you're not quite sure, what do you do about that, you know? Because you've got that gut feeling, but you also don't want to overstep your boundaries.
All too often, people don't pay attention to their inner feelings. We as people have the ability to understand whether or not we can verbalize why or not when there's something wrong. It's better to report and have the report come back negative than it is to let the abuse continue.
Yeah. Okay. Any final words of advice, too? I think I've got what I mean, you've said it right there, I think, most of all.
I think what you have to do is keep in mind that the whole idea is to have our children grow to be functional, healthy, independent adults. And abused children, unfortunately, bring that into their relationships with their spouses, and they carry it on. They can carry it on to their children, and we need to break that cycle of violence so that we have a healthy society.
Okay, Judge, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Important information. We really,
Thank you
really
for having me. I
appreciate it. Thanks so
appreciate it.
much.